Alrighty, well, it's the top of the hour. We're going to start this hour with a land acknowledgement, as we have been doing, but one that maybe gives us a little more context around land acknowledgements in the spirit of Truth and Reconciliation Day, which is tomorrow. This is specific to the Calgary region, but I think the message rings true for any one in Alberta. And so just so you know, these videos, there's a longer version available on the Calgary Foundation's YouTube site. This is the short version, so I'll just play it now. Hopefully this share screen.
What is land acknowledgement?
Those of us that are continuing our oral history are blessed. What we shared, that was told from way back.
We were part of the ecosystem. We were not masters of it.
You know, after we grow up from our biological mothers, the earth becomes our caregiver. Everything that we need is there.
We were raised to believe that everything has a spirit, and that everything around us is alive and has a purpose.
The spirit of the land and our spirit. You can't separate land and people.
In Treaty 7 territory, I'm accepted, I'm something, and I'm with my people.
We honor our ancestors by acknowledging Treaty 7 territory. We acknowledge the Treaty 7 nations, the Piikani First Nation, the Siksika First Nation, the Kainai First Nation, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. We acknowledge the ancestral territory of the Siksikaitsitapi, the Blackfoot Confederacy, and the home of Métis Region number 3.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. And I encourage everyone to check out the longer version as well. I tried very quickly before the hour started to find a resource similar in Edmonton and didn't, but we'll keep looking. And Amber is just going to share her screen. So we will take an extra moment to acknowledge the unceded territories around the traditional lands of the Treaty 6 territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Nakota, Sioux, as well as the Métis in that region. So being our new day of reflection around Truth and Reconciliation tomorrow, we will put some resources in the chat. Just give me a few minutes for certain events that you can take part in around the province tomorrow in doing so. And so I'll pass the rest of the intro off to Gail.
And I'm happy to do this, although if Ruth Ann is here, Ruth Ann.
Oh, sorry, Ruth Ann. Sorry.
Yes.
I forgot we did a switcheroo. I'll also just mention for those who are new to the rainforest, my name is Bridget Legault. I'm the community manager in Calgary. Amber Rowden is here, community storyteller in Calgary. And then our steering committee from Rainforest in Edmonton is here to help co-host. And is Ruth Ann here?
I believe so.
I am, yes.
Sorry, Ruth Ann, I'll pass it over to you.
No, that's okay. That's okay. And great job with the land acknowledgement. That's very cool. I'm really glad to see that you're building in some of that. And I don't know if you have the resource, but I'll just mention it because maybe Amber can look it up and pop it in the chat as well for the Indigenous Canada course through U of A. It is a free course and it is amazing, and it will teach you so much about Indigenous relations and the history of our relations in Canada.
Actually, Ruth Ann, if I can mention something on that, because OnLIA is a tech company in the province that actually created that massive online course. And actually it broke all records because a certain actor from something Creek had recommended that course. And now think 100,000 people, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people have now seen that course.
Yeah, I plug it every chance I get. I'm part of the Western hub of the Writing Relations Circle through the John Humphrey Center for Peace and Human Rights, and it's just part of the diversity and inclusion work I do. And yeah, I'm really happy to see the strides we're making in that. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Gail. I wonder what creek that could be. You want to start the video, I guess?
Sure.
What does it take to realize an idea? Or for a seed to sprout? At Rainforest Alberta, we know the answer is rooted in trust. Traditionally, Albertans have cultivated their ideas in established systems. Inputs that don't fit these systems are weeded out. Opportunities for growth are missed. But now, Albertans want a dynamic landscape that can evolve organically, like a rainforest. At Rainforest Alberta, we believe a culture of trust is the fertile soil where ideas grow. Our budding innovation ecosystem is a network of relationships pulling each other up as they push forward in their own field. Trust breaks down barriers. An open, inclusive network increases collaborative innovation. Successful breakthroughs inspire new ideas. A cycle begins. Rainforest Alberta is a movement to amplify trust by cultivating honesty, inclusion, and accountability. How? Our social contract holds us accountable to demonstrate trust across the province. We meet to have honest conversations around collaboration. This leads to more inclusive spaces for everyone to fearlessly build new ideas together. By raising the standard of trust, Alberta's ideas, talent, and resources can be evergreen. Visit rainforestab.ca to sign the social contract and start growing together.
So yeah, we have the 6 pillars that we use to guide our conversations here, and culture is huge, and a big part of that is that trust that we're talking about, right? That psychological safety to share and express ideas. We support leadership and are building and growing new leaders all the time. We provide resources like we just did for that Coursera course, and that is where I took it as well, Amber. We have engaging activities through, meetups and conferences and that type of thing, and then the infrastructure around that, and just modeling all of this, right, through mentorship. And yeah, we just have a little housekeeping here. Use the chat, it's really great to engage that way. You can reach out individually if it's, a relationship that you want to sort of target in on, or, just collectively to the group. We love to see lots of actions there. We always love to see your pretty faces and handsome faces as well. So cameras are always nice. Feel free to ask questions. That's why we're here. We really want to support you in your work and meet the needs that you're having. And yeah, Slack is a channel that's active as well. And the recordings are always available if you can't be here live. That's it.
Thank you so much, Ruth Ann.
We have a lot of tech to manage there, Amber. We have Maxim in the crowd here, I believe. He's now been made co-host and will be our founder presenting today. So I will let Amber introduce Maxim.
I had the bio and it escaped. So I just pull it up. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
No worries. I will just mention for those who are newer to Lunch Without Lunch. So this is our weekly event where we do bring the community together, but we also convene virtually around our Slack channel. So again, sign the social contract and you can gain access to that. Contact us if you don't have access. But we have been featuring founders either through a tour of their facility this summer and now into the fall, or just hearing founder stories. So we can all be inspired, whether we are founders or aspiring founders or on startup teams, etc. And so that is the spirit of what we are doing again today with Maxim from Vinterre. So ready to roll, Amber?
I am. All right. So Maxim is a business and technology professional with extensive experience in business transformation gained across diverse industries. In 2018, he launched a family office firm. He is an early stage pre-seed and seed investor with a focus on founder-led, mission-driven companies at the cutting edge of disruptive technology. He is primarily focused on the creation of new industries and the evolution of existing industries. Technology is the common foundation element to all of his investments. Maxim has founded 9 companies to date that are scaling rapidly. Maxim has owned a wine importing company since 2014 and has an in-depth understanding of the wine trade. So without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce Maxim, who's going to tell us all about Vinterre today.
Well, thank you so much, Amber. It's my pleasure to join the Rainforest Alberta community and have this conversation. So the way that I was planning to approach the conversation, you just talk a little bit about the Vinterre, more so from the perspective of let me share my screen, of the journey that we're on and why we're focusing on. I don't know if you can see my screen.
There we go, we can see that now.
Okay. Okay.
Did you want a full screen up?
Sure, yeah, I'm gonna present it. Perfect. So the way that Vinterre came about, as Amber alluded as part of the introduction, in 2014 I started a wine import business, and I kept coming across the same types of challenges on the producer and the importer side. So as a bit of a background, I'm an immigrant to Canada. I came over in '97 from Bulgaria, and I really grew up on a farm with my grandparents. We used to make wine. I looked after a lot of the crops on the farm, but my favorite one was looking after the vineyards with my grandfather and then making wine. And as you can imagine, farm up in the mountains. Like my grandfather would spend a lot of time with me teaching me, and I just fell in love with wine, not so much because of the drinking. I just love the process of how you can take something and turn it into something. So when it came to Canada in '97, I started my university at the University of New Brunswick. I wanted to start an agency there. One of the challenges that they came across is the wine industry is heavily regulated in Canada, and it's provincially regulated. So each province has its own regulator. So that made it challenging in terms of starting an agency. But it was always on my radar. And when the opportunity arose in Alberta, I ended up starting finally my wine import company. So Vinterre really is there with a focus to help improve the life for producers, importers, and as well as wine buyers. So if you look at what we're trying to do is from grape to glass, we're trying to allow the people that are involved in the value chain to spend their time where it matters. How do I advance the slide? So our mission, our purpose is to empower the success of the global wine community by creating connections that promote trust, efficiency, and sustainability. And there's some words that obviously overlap with the Rainforest Alberta's values. And there's a reason behind this. So what we're trying to do is tackle a big market, both in my family office company as well as in Vinterre. I try to closely align what we do with United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals. So we're trying to focus on creating this perfect alignment between different stakeholders. Producers are definitely the first stakeholders. The other stakeholders are governments in terms of promoting rural development, community development. A heavy focus for what we're trying to do is around the environment, and we'll come to this. So the problem that we're trying to solve with Vinterre really is finding like the trust component. Finding the right importer distributors is very costly and time consuming, but also it's fraught with fraud. So it's a very big expense for a producer to send samples to an importer to taste before they decide, and there's a lot of fraudulent inquiries. So we're trying to promote trust by creating this due diligence, almost like having like a Dun and Bradstreet report on a producer, Dun and Bradstreet report on an importer, and establish this trust between the two parties so that they can do business with trust. The other thing that's a challenge is we're talking with farmers, and that's how they self-describe themselves. Like you go and meet them in the vineyards, and they're wearing just coveralls and work clothes, and so we're trying to make the process simple for them in terms of managing all of their digital assets, whether it's like bottle shots or tech sheets or whatever else they might have, and as well as how do they share this information with their prospective buyers, whether it's on the wholesale side or whether it's on the retail side. Trying to make the interaction easy, and then the product we're building around ESG is focused on sustainability and community. A lot of the focus for Vinterre is trying to promote climate forward actions. So we're building a module around ESG that focuses on water management in vineyards, waste management, like including composting, energy management, carbon management, as well as the supply chain and decarbonization of supply chain. A key component to what we're trying to do, and that's where the focus around standing out, is trying to work with regulators in coming up with consistency around the standards that need to be used around wine. There's some definition in terms of what organic means, but it's still very much up to the consumer to identify what is in a wine and what a wine is specifically, whether a wine is sustainable or organic. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency does not mandate that any of the ingredients that go in wine are included. So we're trying to promote this transparency in terms of what is in the product. If you look at a conventional wine, it can include up to 200 different additives or things that are not natural. Most people think of wine as just grapes, but that's not the reality. So we're trying to create almost like a scoring mechanism by driving that transparency around how sustainable a wine is in their practices. This is the description of the problem and how we're trying to address it with a solution. Just as a bit of us and why us, and I really don't want this to be a conversation around trying to sell on Vinterre. The founding team is all Calgary based, 3 founders. Our team is 11 people full-time working on the development of this solution. We are collaborating across different domains. We see this as an opportunity for us to leverage across different industry, particularly in agriculture. From my own personal investment perspective, the things that I'm really the most excited about as an Albertan are the things that I think are giving us competitive advantage. And those are around carbon management, ag tech and food tech as being industries that I think are very appropriate for us to drive competitive advantage. And so I just think that there's something that we can take and export to the world, and we have whether it's either geographic or asset-based advantage. The domain knowledge, obviously, being in the industry for 7 years, that has helped us to develop this, and we're trying to scale this across the different domains. And we're starting off with a focus on kind of like where does the regulator stand. So the regulator, but in the different provinces, the state focuses on beer, wine, spirits, and cannabis. So those are the 4 verticals that we're planning to replicate. Stakeholder alignment, I talked about it, like we're in consultations with the governments, with export governments, with import governments, with vintners association, with producers, with importers. We're trying to find the perfect intersection between the interest. So because like our personal belief is that what's good for humanity, it's good for business. So we're starting off with finding that intersection first. We're working with a lot of talent that's unfortunately outside of Canada, but if you look from a technology perspective, it's a negative unemployment rate in Alberta. which is fantastic because we're seeing this natural diversification of the industries. But if you're trying to find tech talent in Alberta, it's a hard proposition. And in terms of distribution channels, we have letters of intent from different governments to support us because they recognize the impact that has for their countries from economic development, export development, rural development, environment, and sustainability perspective. That's the competition. It's a fairly fragmented market in the world. A lot of the focus has been on the wine tech as it pertains to consumers. So you have the Vivinos and Wine Searcher and all this, because that's where the easy pickings. The business to business side is heavily fragmented, just because it's harder to address because of the fragmented regulatory environment that exists. Just screenshots of the product in terms of how it works. One thing that I forgot to mention, if you look, so the higher your level of wine knowledge it gets, the more you recognize how inaccurate the information is on the internet when you're looking for wine information. So what we're trying to do there is, by engaging the producer first, we're trying to get through a trusted and verified information. So the producer enters the information, not the external source. That information shows that it's verified by producers. Then we're collaborating with the export governments to verify things that the import government needs, like volume declarations, like a certificate of origins. So we're trying to build trust along the process around what is the information, so that if you are a consumer, you can have a high degree of confidence that the information that you're seeking on a wine producer or a wine is actually correct and not marketing speak. Our channels and kind of like what we're trying to accomplish, the producers, importers, and the governments are our first three customers. And it's leveraging our existing network of 2,000 producers, the referrals. So on average, a producer has between, they roughly have about 50 importers or distributors. They have anywhere between 20 and 100 plus importers. So in terms of distribution channel, the referrals become a really important one. Vintners Association, like what are we talking to wine growers of BC or wine growers of Ontario, they become really important stakeholder for us. Partnership and alliances, we're trying to actively work with the regulators to come up with one standard for sustainability that can be applied to vineyards, government regulators event, and then the certification channels. The model, that's kind of what we're tracking. We're planning to launch the producer portal in November, and that's the back of the napkin. Forecast cash flow forecast model. We know that it's wrong. We don't know how wrong it is. That's the founding team, myself, Will Riley, and Brandon Castor. And what we've tried to do is find that perfect synergy between the three of us. I've worked with these gentlemen for 5 years, and Brandon is extremely strong on the technical side, has worked for an enterprise software company for 12 years. He brings the technology perspective. Will Riley used to be the director of customer success for an enterprise software company. And then obviously I bring the more business and wine knowledge. These are real life scenarios that customers that we're getting, like some of the producers like Ampelea, they're telling us that by leveraging the product, they can realize as much as 50% savings in their time. And that really concludes the presentation. I didn't want to take any more time, but really open it up for questions and comments.
Thank you, Maxim. That's great. Second time I've seen your picture. So I'm just going to dig into some questions and started up with Vivienne. Is the goal to have a Vinterre certification or something the customer can recognize?
That's right. It's on. So we're using agile methodology on our product roadmap. We have a product backlog item called V-score. So we're working on using artificial intelligence to come up with a score that pulls information obviously from the government, from the wine producer, but we're trying to come up with a score that says this wine is at this many points based on the information that's being entered. But we're trying to come up with two scores: sustainability score, which is all over the map at the moment because there's no consistency even on the standard and the regulation setting side. And then a score that's a combination of professionals rating the wines as well as consumers. Because, I mean, from a trade perspective, the scores are fairly inconsistent, and you can have two super tasters taste the wine and give it different scores. So what we're trying to do is say, okay, well, we need to democratize the process, but yet we need to apply some professionalism to the scores. And on the sustainability side, we're measuring things like how much carbon is sequestering, how much water you're using, what is the plant density, space between rows, do you use cover crops, how do you deal with your garbage, like or waste, like do you compost, how much gas is being released. We're trying to capture a lot of this ESG type information. Because this is a digital asset for the producers, on average, the sustainability focused producers can sequester as many as 40 tons per hectare of carbon. And the price of carbon in Canada is $50 per hectare. $50 per ton. And that price is going to $200 by 2030. So it's a digital asset, and it doesn't really change their viticultural practices. All it does is forces more rigor around the capture of information so that it can be verified.
Extensive. Okay, great. Marnie's asking how have some sommeliers responded to the AI component?
Absolutely. So we're trying to onboard as many sommeliers as possible, so that they can provide their scores. So essentially what we're trying to do is take the a weighted average of the scores of sommeliers. So essentially we're trying to bifurcate what are your consumer and what's your level of wine knowledge versus sommelier that possess a high level of knowledge, and then assign a weight factor and then produce the score.
Okay. And then to add to that, Vivian's asking, how will those scores compare with the sommelier and government regulations, which vary from province to province?
I'm not sure that I understand the question. Is she able to, because the government regulations are definitely very specific on a province by province level.
Vivian, do you want to unmute, or up to you? Maybe she's unable to. That's okay. V is asking, how do you measure your environmental footprint regarding importing and exporting? V, you may want to unmute. Do you mean like Vinterre's own environmental footprint, or the producers or the users?
Both. So very good question. So things are changing. So and what are the questions? Maybe this is where it's coming from. For example, SAQ, the provincial regulator in Quebec, said you're not allowed to bring wine if it exceeds a certain weight, and I can't remember what was the weight. But essentially the driving changed that way. So traditionally, producers would package wine in heavy bottles that give the consumer the impression that the wine is more expensive or more valuable, but really doesn't add, outside of sparkling wines that have to hold certain atmospheric pressure in the bottle. There's no need for a thick glass. So thin glass is where we're going, and we're working with a sustainable wine group in terms of figuring out how do we move from the traditional packaging of glass being the most expensive, and really the journey happens, the most carbon is generated on the journey from winery to consumer, and particularly in the last, like the ship is the least from a carbon perspective. So what we're trying to do to answer this question, it is evolving, we don't have it figured out yet, is to capture the total life cycle for a particular product, and then produce a score based on that. So how much carbon are you going to emit in getting the product from winery to a retailer? Because that's probably all that we can calculate.
Says muted there. Extensive, again, very extensive. That's great. Thanks for the answer. I'll head back up to Aaron's comment around blockchain. He says it sounds like this could be a good opportunity to use blockchain. Is that something Vinterre is doing?
Well, are we doing, one of my companies, a blockchain company. So we are looking at blockchain. The challenge is, and from a traceability perspective and authentication perspective, the challenge is if you examine where wine fraud occurs, the wine is either doctored at the winery or the wine is doctored after it has left retailers. So we can control the journey between a winery, presuming that the winery is doing the right things all the way. So if you look at the Alberta model, the wine goes into the St. Albert warehouse, and from there it's distributed to the retailers. Up until the retailer journey, we can control and assign, like put the information on a ledger. But once it leaves their hands, it's nearly impossible. We're looking at new patented technologies that supposedly you can scan through the bottle and identify the DNA of the wine. It's not quite there yet. So for that reason, we have not tried to go down that journey. But there are other platforms that are a little bit more advanced. But again, they're more focused on the journey. So in Europe, there's a really common concept where a wine is kind of, you can trade wine by putting it in a custom bonded warehouse. So they would trace the journey up to the bonded warehouse, and from there on, really the journey ceases. So we're trying to see if there's a way to extend it all the way to the consumer. If you can calculate, kind of like to the previous question around total life cycle assessment for a particular product, calculate the score, then to be able to offset the cost of the carbon to emit via buying green credits and things like that. Early days.
Okay. And Shelley's asking, will this improve consistency and transparency for consumers around what is organic? That's a loaded question. We're trying to work with the regulators because the standards vary between EcoCert or the AB in Europe and California. So yes, we're trying to get to standardization around what is organic. Organic is fairly well defined in terms of the inputs that you can have. Sustainable is like where it's like all over the map in terms of what is sustainable. Yeah, for sure. Okay, Brent has his hand up. Go ahead, Brent.
Thanks, Bridget. What a complicated area to work in. I applaud your efforts and a great presentation. I'm kind of curious from my tours of wineries, and I know Jackson Triggs had a sample growing area in the Okanagan. They talked about the 1,000+ different things, like the barrel and how it was fired, and the growing, like they do satellite, how much rain falls on what month and what day, and what are you looking to see, like a consumer accessible website at some point in the future? So, or is it just sort of reduced down to one number that says, oh, this is a score of 91 or this is a score of 543?
No, absolutely. That's the plan. Is to extend this to the consumers, but this is more of a longer term journey. And yes, the way that we're building this so that the consumer should have access to all of this information. The only thing that we're putting behind some form of a wall that the producer approves are things that they're sensitive about, like the export price list and lab reports. Everything else, the consumer would have access to, we're capturing information at a very, very detailed level. It takes the producer about 13 minutes to input a wine if they do it on a wine by wine basis, because they have to capture viticultural practices, vinicultural practices, what type of vessel it is, how long it stays in that vessel. So it's very, very detailed, but for some consumers that's important. Google license data from companies like that. So what we're trying to do is, in the process, we're trying to correct the misinformation that exists by capturing the right information.
Great. Are there any other questions for Maxim before we head into some networking time? Nope. Okay, Maxim, big thank you to you. Yeah, very complex world of regulatory mumbo jumbo do you play within. So kudos to your whole team. for that, as Brent said. There's some other resources, tools, and kind of comments in the chat that you can check out. And hopefully you can stick with us for some breakout
Absolutely.
rooms.
Absolutely.
Awesome, thank you. So Gail has put some resources in the chat that may be a great point of conversation for the breakout rooms. We also have the recent announcement from Alberta Innovates around the new accelerator programs coming to our province. Innovate Edmonton and Platform Calgary have been granted funding from many levels of government for a pre-accelerator, and those will hopefully funnel into the 3 accelerator programs that we have coming to the province. So throw that in the chat as a conversation starter, or hopefully a starter for you, or talk about all things truth and reconciliation, or talk about, our good friend COVID, or whatever else might be coming up in your world. If you're looking for something to gain from the community, that is what we're here for, is to give back and help each other out. So do not be shy in asking for support in your own work. I will create these rooms. We have lots to talk about. Some may be large, but we always have some dropout here. So I have to make them a bit larger to start, and we'll give you a bit more time than normal, being that it's a larger group. So here we go. Thank you.
No, nice to see you too.
Yeah,
I put it in my calendar now, and I blocked that time. So I'm trying to be as consistent as I can.
Well, the community appreciates your presence, and
so much to learn.
Totally right. Thank you everybody for coming back. That was super quick room. So keep connecting on LinkedIn or Slack or however you choose to do so. If you want to share your LinkedIn profile or contact details in the chat, please feel free. Any community announcements happening here this week?
Just some of the things I put in the chat, as you already mentioned, Bridget, but especially the Start Alberta Awards, and the nominations are only open till Sunday. So it's a very quick turnaround. So please do look. Start Alberta has a great website of, Alberta companies across the province. That's a great database anyways, as well as nominate. There are nominations for companies and individuals and collaborations. And I see that Robert has his hand up, so maybe we should go there.
Yeah, I just have a quick question for Maxim about the company. I was just wondering if, I know you're into the regulatory side, are you planning to bring in a commerce platform into the mix? Like business to business or business to consumer kind of thing?
Absolutely. So business to business being the first one. So essentially what we're trying to do is make it super simple for a producer. So at the moment, if you look, their business is really fragmented. So they use WhatsApp mostly for communications. They have a profile on Facebook, they will have an Instagram, they have a website. So what we're trying to do is enable them to stand up almost like a Shopify for their stores, and then tie it back to the compliance requirements in terms of drop ships and things that they require from a regulatory perspective to collect the right value-added tax or comply with the provincial regulations. So that is definitely on the plan, and direct to consumer has gone from about 15 to about 30% in terms of composition for the North American market. Europe very significantly, but absolutely that's on the path.
Thanks.
Awesome, great question. Good to hear. Thank you again, Maxim, for the presentation today. We just have a couple minutes left. Gail mentioned Start Alberta. You can find a link to Start Alberta platform on the Rainforest website, and they're going to be here in 2 weeks to show you how to create a profile and be actively involved with that platform. And next week, we have Uproot from Edmonton, Chris Laurel sharing a tour of the Uproot facility there. So we look forward to seeing you then. And if people want to stick around, we had a lot of folks stick around for breakouts last week. So please feel free to hang around again, give it a minute or two, and can put people in breakouts to keep connecting.